slept well. I was enjoying the cold, although we could have used an extra blanket. But I'm just kind of tired and sleepy. And for today's stanza, I don't know how I'm going to explain this because you guys are mostly warriors, right? Y'all are infantry, artillery, special operations, Navy SEALs, Rangers, Special Forces. You are all trained to inflict damage on the enemy. And here what I'm saying is to injure an opponent is to injure yourself. To control aggression without inflicting injury is the art of peace. That's stanza 52. Now, I know in the art of war, Sun Tzu argues that you should never attack unless you're certain of victory, and that a true master general wins before the battle even starts. So this idea is not without precedent. But where I want to take the idea is into two realms. First is the, civilian realm, so back as a civilian. And second, into the what do I teach my kids realm. So in the context of life as a civilian, after you've come back from a combat environment where you were part of a larger kind of machine, you're really on your own. I mean, not to the extent that you're isolated and no one's there to help you, but you're no longer part of this larger entity whose job it is to do the will of the commander in chief, right? So you're not inside of an entity that has orders. You are yourself. So that's an important distinction to make, because when we are engaged on orders, this rule applies, but it doesn't apply in the context of the job. So in the context of being a civilian, to be able to control aggression without creating injury is incredibly useful. One, you can't do away with aggression. You can't get rid of aggression. So aggression is always going to be a part of the experience. Two, if you do cause injury to someone, you're going to have to deal with consequences. And those consequences could be legal, or they could just be social, or they could be like a spiritual kind of thing. Feel guilt, things like that. And that's something that I think we all, as trained warriors, have to deal with. If we are unable to control ourselves and say hurt somebody pretty good, not only do you have to deal with all the consequences of that, but you also have to deal with the actual feeling that you hurt somebody pretty good. And so it's just really a non-starter. And so if you're still engaging with the aggression and inflicting harm, you've got a short-lived kind of thing. You can't take that very far as a civilian. You just can't go anywhere with it. I mean, you can kind of go some places with it, but you can't really create anything with it. And then the second piece is that what you want to teach your kids, or is that what you want to teach your nephew or your niece? And the answer is just absolutely no. Even if you want them to become a warrior later on, for them to not understand how to engage with aggression without causing injury would just be a huge lesson not learned. It'd just be a huge road not traveled. And so it just makes a lot of sense in the context of being a civilian and what you would pass on to realize the truth behind this. To injure an opponent is to injure yourself. To injure an opponent is to injure yourself. And if you think about that in the context of social interaction, if you've ever been into a fight with someone who you have to see again, and you go and interact with them in a social setting, you know that the energy is hyped. You know that the feeling is up. And so when that happens, it's kind of like a form of anxiety. You're not the best version of yourself. So you may have, inflicted injury on this person beforehand, but now this person has guilt and victim status. And guilt and victim status is not a status that is without power. It's a very much powerful status. And it's a status that legally has some value and socially has value. And so you have to remember, there is a stigma associated with the veteran around violence. And so we have to contend with that. So those are the two kind of most basic, right? What can you continue to learn and practice as a civilian? But also, what would you pass on? And I guess the final piece, and this is the piece that has really become valuable to me over time, and that's the way my body is less and less triggered by just everything. Just everything across the board has less of a triggering element. And because there's less of a triggering element, I just feel more freedom to operate. And one of the things that I've found so valuable, and this has been over the years with the art of peace, is that there's so many more ways to attack, per se, that don't cause injury and that don't cause disruption. I do it in Facebook all the time. I do it on social media all the time. People come at a particular angle. People will come at you from a particular angle, use particular words, use particular styles. And by not being triggered by it, typically there's an angle that you can observe or you can use that can totally disrupt whatever angle they're coming at without causing them to be more angry. And ideally, if you can leave any conversation that had edge, with everyone feeling seen, heard, and comfortable about how everything went, you got nothing to worry about. You've got nothing to worry about later on. And chances are, the fact that you've done that person will have a deeper respect for you. So the value calculus of aggression just is really low in the long term. But the value calculus of accounting for aggression, recognizing aggression as a kind of a real thing, but having the ability to not kind of take on the aggression as some form of energetic anxiety or fear, but to simply recognize aggression the same way you would recognize water is wet. And then with your open awareness, with your freedom of movement, attack that space without any kind of worry that it's going to come back on you in a negative way. It's hard to explain. I'm gonna have to show you what I mean in some instances on Facebook. But I'm telling you, there's so many ways to take someone out without hurting them. And there's so many ways to take someone out without them even realizing that you've taken them out. I mean, if you can take someone out and they don't even realize you've taken them out, and they are just no longer angry, or they're just no longer sad or afraid, they're just they feel, oh, I was heard, I was acknowledged. All right, I'm going to go about my business. I mean, gosh, that's so much easier than everything else. I mean, think of the alternative. So, anyway, the reason why all this stuff is tied in with the practice is you cannot do any of this stuff without the awareness of what this stuff is doing to you when it shows up inside of you. You cannot practice the art of peace without recognizing what's showing up inside you. And I'll remind you of one of my favorite stanzas, which is stanza 5. If you have not linked yourself to true emptiness, you will never understand the art of peace. True emptiness doesn't mean you're unaware. True emptiness just means that what's coming in doesn't trigger any aspect of you. You're just aware of it. It's not like a billiard ball where it hits and something else bounces. It just comes in and you just kind of watch it come in. You're like, oh, okay, there it is. And you decide what to do with it. It doesn't come in, latch onto something, and then away you go with your internal environment and your emotions and your feelings and your thought processes and all this other kind of stuff. It just doesn't happen. Like, for example, last night there was a situation in our area, in our county. And it was a situation that really, really triggered my wife's internal environment. And so for the next 2.5 hours, she was reading about it, learning about it, and fantasizing about it. Fantasizing about it and what she would do, how she would solve the situation, angry about it. And her back started to tweak, right? And she would say that it was from something physical, something earlier. And I won't argue with her, so I wouldn't say otherwise. But I know what it is. I mean, the reason why her back's tweaking is the same way it happens to her dad. They become tense. They become really tense when fear really triggers them. They become tense, and they get back spasms. It's the same thing that's happening. But I couldn't tell her that. She would not take my observation to heart, because you can't take those kind of observations to heart, because if you did, the fullness with which you responded to what you were responding to would no longer make sense. It would no longer have the kind of hold or value, because it would just seem kind of, really, that's what it is. It's not, you mean it what we're challenging here are deep beliefs. I mean, we are challenging aspects of human experience that have been valued a particular way for a long time. And so practicing mindfulness, self-awareness, psychological and emotional control, these elements are disruptive, and they're disruptive in a powerful way. But what it disrupts, and we talked a little bit about this yesterday, is it disrupts the thing that holds on to one's identity, the ego. And if the ego gets disrupted, there's a very ungrounded, disorienting kind of experience to that. And I think a lot of people are not aware that is what happens, nor are they aware of the uncomfortable feeling that shows up inside of them when that happens. So anyway, the practice in the context of aggression shows up really fast. So what I want to do is I want to go through the bells in a kind of a quick kind of a way that would mimic, some kind of situation. So I'll go through the bells, but it's going to be a little bit untraditional. I'm gonna break down each piece in the context of a situation. So go ahead, get yourself set, get into a comfortable alignment, and by that I mean you want to be seated in a way that's easy for you to get upright. It's easy for you to be up. Okay. Cushion helps. If you're seated on a chair, that's fine. You could be laying down, but it's better to practice upright, because ultimately what I want to guide you through is an upright alertness. So, all right. So first bell is going to be the stimulus. All right. Okay, so picture yourself online and you're reading something that is totally against everything you believe, and you start to become very agitated. And so the first thing you want to notice is the agitation itself. And so you can actually tame your mind with the agitation. So as you're visualizing the reading of the words and the seeing of the symbols, the feeling in your body could start to show up somewhere. Now, it may show up in your head, but what I want you to do is I want you to focus on the actual feelings in your body, in your sense of touch, in your sense of just present tense awareness. So where do you feel? What do you feel? How big is it? How deep is it? You're really interacting with what it feels like to be triggered, not where or not why. The why is less relevant. It's where you feel it. So really look for it in your body. So you use that to tame your mind. Now, once you've got an awareness of the fact that, yes, you've got feeling, you've got a triggered feeling inside of your body, you want to move or build around it. So it's okay. So for me, this type of stuff usually happens. I usually feel it right here. So I'm not going to focus fully on right here yet. I'm gonna build my alignment first. So next, I'm recognized. I've been triggered. I feel a sense of aggression. I want to fight back. I want to text back. I want to tweet back. I want to post back. So I feel that here. Well, before I'm going to do anything, I'm going to go through the alignment of my body. I'm going to recognize that I'm bigger than just what the thing's going on. So I'm going to see my ground. Then I'm going to go to my pelvis, core space, heart space. So I know the anxiety, that feeling's there. It's okay. I just recognize that it's there. Now I go to the top of my head. I'm aligned and alert. I still recognize what's going on in my body. The key piece here is not to be in the story. Don't go into the story of why. Don't go into the story, the fantasy of all that other stuff. Just be present with what's going on. You've built your alignment. So this is mostly awareness. You're being aware. You're aware. You're aware. So now you move into interact with. So you move into interact with. You're mostly aware in the first two bells. It's all about awareness, building proper awareness of the present moment, being aligned properly in the present moment. So now you move into breath. Now it's interacting with it. What's going on? So you've got its location. Say you've been triggered. It's right here. How intense is it? Maybe it's a 5. Its direction is it's kind of collapsing in on itself. Its depth, it's a little bit above my heart. It's not behind my heart. It's kind of forward of my heart. So then the depth of it, the direction of it, the size of it, it's mostly here. Okay, so if it's going like this, kind of it's collapsing in, how do I interact with that? Well, if it's collapsing in, what can I do with my breath? I can expand out. So I'll take a deep breath. Now, if it's collapsing in, what's examples of expansion out that I can do? So we've practiced breath to the side, so side ribs. So I'll practice that. Now, front and back, I'll practice that. Now, up and down, practice that. Now, so we go into 4 bells. Now, 4 bells is why you did all that stuff, okay? So you get to 4 bells, and now you're ready to kind of respond. You've gone online, you're triggered, okay? You recognize you're triggered, okay? I know I'm triggered. You use that to tame your mind. You build your alignment because you're not just the trigger. There's more of you than just the trigger. You build that alignment, and then you interact with it. So you use the breath. The breath is always an effective tool to interact with whatever trigger is happening. And so now you react. Now it's time to respond. Now with practice, this can happen quickly, right? It's not like a sustained practice. Like hold on, dum 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 dum. It's quicker than that. That's just something that comes with practice. So now you're into gratitude. Now you're into compassion. So gratitude and compassion neutralize threat very effectively. Now, it can't be done flippantly. It can't be done snidely. It can't be done arrogantly. That can restart the situation. But it can be done genuinely. And when the only way to recognize genuine compassion and gratitude is to get to a present place. And a present place is not one that is consumed by the feeling. A present place is one where you recognize the feeling inside yourself and you understand, aha, I have options here. It's not, oh, I'm stuck in it, I have to do this. It's, I have options here. So you've recognized the feeling, that's bell one. You've built your alignment in an appropriate way, that's bell two. You've interacted with it, which is bell three, and you're breathing. So now what do? So gratitude is acknowledgement. When there is a disruption in flow of cordial energy, a disruption of flow of your energy or someone else's energy or conversation or whatever, acknowledging it in acknowledging it in an authentic way is very debilitating to aggression. If you can acknowledge aggression without sounding like a jerk, it just makes aggression so weak. Aggression needs counter force. Without counter force, aggression becomes very hard. It's slippery. Without a counter force, aggression becomes hard to sustain because lots of times our aggression is it's really just not, it's not very good. It's like aggression is kind of like a loose cannon. It's not really that useful. You know, in the military, they really work hard through drill and ceremony and hierarchy to make sure aggression is held in check. Because typically when you are in an aggressive state, you're kind of a meathead. So that's a problem, right? Now, if you can interact with aggression without adding to it, it just totally disrupts aggression. The energy just kind of goes, I don't know what to do here. So that's number one. The next place to get to is compassion. Compassion is an extra layer of acknowledgement, and then it's an application of goodwill. So you can take somebody from aggressive and angry to, I acknowledge your aggression and your anger, and I appreciate the fact that you were willing to share it with me, to, I get it. I hear I hear what you're talking about, and I feel it. I feel it too, and I can explain it in that context or this context or whatever. But it's another layer of acknowledgement, and then it's a leading of goodwill. So it's like I acknowledge you, and here's a light to look at. Here's a light to shine your way through. And if you can get to the light to shine your way through, then typically what will happen is that the aggression just won't be able to sustain itself. You can notice this in your own body. It's like with my kids, you know, if they're really, really angry and upset and aggressive about one thing or another and they get a popsicle, they immediately settle because their whole being is now consumed by this moment experience. So the same thing can be created, the same thing is you can create that same thing. Instead of using a popsicle, you're using your words. And it's just fascinating and really fun. I mean, it's so much fun to interact with aggression and do it well. It's just a really, really exciting thing. So I encourage you to not sleep on this idea of to injure an opponent is to injure yourself. To control aggression without inflicting injury is the art of peace. I encourage you to really motivate yourself to practice mindfulness, because the other piece of this is that it also takes place if you have conflict within yourself. So if you are in conflict with yourself, you can be aggressive and awful toward yourself and create the same kind of negative, awful dynamic within yourself that you can shift through the practice. So That's what it means when that was yesterday. Yeah, defeat means to defeat the mind of contention that we harbor within. So if yesterday is kind of like the internal struggle, today is kind of like interacting with the outer struggle. But the same principles apply. So anyway, let's finish that up there. You cannot put true. No politics. No politics. All right. Talk to y'all later. Bye.